Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Prometheum debate. Sorry about the delay, but it is nice to see so many people here this evening. The Prometheum is a philosophical organization inspired by the founders of our nation. Our mission is to foster discussion and the free exchange of ideas. We believe that a representative democracy requires citizens that think about and evaluate issues and vote with an educated opinion. Discussion, discourse, and debate are essential to that process. We also believe that the founders of our nation look to us from the past to see how we deal with the future and their great experiment. I'm Stephen Bowling, president of the Prometheum, and I will be your moderator this evening. Our panel includes John Brunig, editorial page editor of the Stamford Advocate, Lisa Mercurio, director of the Fairfield County Information Exchange, and Claude Marest, who teaches at the Academy of Information Technology and Engineering. Each panelist will go in turn and have approximately 22 minutes to question the candidates. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. They are not required to fill that time, only not to exceed it. Rebuttals are allowed at the discretion of the panel with a 45-second response. For full disclosure, Republican candidate Michael Fedeli and Democratic candidate David Martin are members of the Prometheum. We ask that you please turn off your cell phones and that you hold your applause during the actual debate, as it only takes time away from the candidates. Your most important applause, of course, will be in the ballot box. Finally, I want to thank the candidates for participating in our debate and to thank them for entering in what Theodore Roosevelt called the arena. It is often a difficult and thankless road. The Prometheum appreciates all who enter it and the sacrifices they make. We wish them all the best in their journey. And now, applause for our candidates, Michael Fedeli, David Martin, Kathleen Murphy, and John Zito. Welcome, candidates. We look forward to an informative debate. I ask that you respect the time constraints and that you address the panelist asking the question and not each other. The questions will be addressed to all of you, and as previously determined, Mr. Martin, the question will go to you first. I'm sure you can all tell us what's right about Stamford, what a great place it is. But if you were telling a stranger about our city, what would you tell him the challenges are that need to be addressed? What's wrong with Stamford?
We are on the precipice of greatness, and that is the struggle. Our community is so diverse, not just in ethnic or religious background, but the housing makeup, the jobs, the education. And as we struggle together in one of the most difficult ventures of all the cities in the country, because quite frankly, I think our city is more successful and more diverse than any other city in this country. But that is the challenge in front of us. How are we going to manage our way going forward with all this diversity, all of this opportunity, but at the same time, the threat to the heritage and greatness that Stamford has been? And I would tell you that's the greatest single challenge.
Okay. Mr. Zito?
Well, Stamford is a great town. There's nothing bad about Stamford. I will tell people to come here, visit our school systems, visit our parks, and come see everything that we have here.
Mr. Fedeli?
Stamford is poised for greatness. However, unfortunately, for a number of years, we've had issues that have created a gap in education that we somehow don't seem to be able to close. We have a housing disparity with low income and those who can have high income and taxes. Our tax situation has gone out of control, particularly with the current reval situation that's happened. And we need a plan. We need someone in government to work with the boards, to work with all the citizens, to make sure that we have a blueprint that takes Stamford into the 21st century. The challenges are difficult. This is not an easy job. But clearly we need to be able to address what has happened, to understand what has happened, to have the history to know what has happened, and to take all that and to put together programs that will move us forward over the next at least 4 years, a blueprint that will make Stamford take advantage of the opportunities that are here and to be able to address those issues, as I mentioned earlier, in the area of education, in the area of housing, in the area of jobs. I think that's what makes Stamford unique, special, and a place that I want to call home. Thank you.
Ms. Murphy?
Thank you very much. I would, first I would probably warn them, like they do in some of the TV shows, that what they might be about to hear might scare them. So I would like to say that there's ways of fixing what I'm going to talk about, but the city has more than significant challenges. The financial situation is very dire. I believe that we are going down a path which would bring us to actually into near bankruptcy. Again, I think we can fix this, but why do I say that? I say that if you look at it, we've issued debt, bond offering after bond offering, and we have ended up with $500 million of debt, yet our schools are in disrepair, our roads are in disrepair, the sewers still need a lot of money, so our infrastructure is in disrepair. But I would say that a lot of this is, and the developers rule, but I would say that with change, with getting involved in the political scene and really trying to break the hold the two parties have on this government, we can make a difference and we can change the status quo. But the status quo is not a very good, it does not lead to a very good future. And as I would think, the status quo, given the financial issues that we have, we would be raising taxes to such a level over the next several years that we would have taxpayer flight, and that would be a terrible thing for the people who are staying here. But we can fix it. I wanted to say that I would be very optimistic. This can be fixed. Thank you.
Would any of you like a rebuttal? Okay. Next question, Mr. Zito, goes to you. What is your view on outsourcing and privatization? Would your administration favor it or be against it? And could you give us examples and where you would do such?
Could you repeat that, please?
What is your view on outsourcing and privatization?
Well, that's very good. I like to keep all the work in Stamford. Stamford has a lot of people here that are not working. We have corporates coming in, bringing out-of-state workers in. Not fair to Stamford people. As of mayor, I will make sure that any work that goes on in Connecticut, in Stamford himself, let's give the Stamford people a shot at it first. We have unions in Connecticut. Guys are not working. And this is going on all over the world. But in Stamford, that's what I'm concentrating on. If I become the new mayor of Stamford, I will bring work for Stamford, for the Stamford people. Keep the work in Stamford. We're having tree companies coming in, cutting our trees. The workers are from out of town. Where's the money going? Back out of town. For my own heart, I'd rather see the Stamford people get the money. Sidewalks need to be repaired. Roads need to be repaired. A lot of things need to be repaired. Let's keep the work in Stamford. There's small businesses out here in Stamford are suffering. They can do the work for the city of Stamford. Thank you.
Mr. Fideli?
Thank you, Steve. I believe that there may be opportunities to look at outsourcing and privatization. I mean, clearly we do that in industry, and government has done it in the areas of information technology and things of that nature. I think when you go through a budget, you have to ask yourself, and if we will in the Fideli administration, line by line by line, is this something we need? If it's something we need, can we do it better? And how can we do it better? And in the Fideli administration, we'll take a look at those things. I believe that we have a lot of great city employees who provide a lot of great city service here in the city of Stamford. That doesn't mean that it cannot be done better and less expensive. As costs go up and we as taxpayers bear that cost, we need to take a look at better ways to do it, through innovation possibly, through more efficiencies. In a Fideli administration, we'll do that. I come from a area of business that's what we do for a living. We look at efficiencies, we look at technology, and how can we do more with less? How can we create a better customer experience for our citizens? Because this is what it's all about. You know, government doesn't create anything. Government is a service that we provide you, the taxpayers. And the Fidelity Administration, we're going to have a welcome mat at the front door that welcomes all of you to get the service that you want. And that may be achieved through privatization, it may be achieved through outsourcing, and it may be achieved by the citizens of Stamford that are there today, just doing it a little bit different. Thank you.
Ms. Murphy?
Thank you. Well, on the, I believe what we do, you evaluate what are really our core competencies, and then really what can we afford. Obviously, education and public safety would be right at the top of our, we must do, and we must do well and maybe better in the case of education. But I think we should be looking at outsourcing. But my definition of outsourcing, and I spoke out at the last Board of Finance, or during the last budget on the Board of Finance, that we could potentially outsource the custodians. We were paying a lot of money for the custodians, and actually custodians called me at my home after that to not object. Because when the work rules are the problem, it's not their salaries. So we need to change the work rules, whether we're talking about the Smith House, the fire, the police, or the custodians. It's the work rules that are causing us the problems. You change shifts, and you can do a lot of things. But custodians, for instance, they really shouldn't be a premium for the Saturday if they're working at the schools because of there's a football game. So we really have to change the work rules. And as I said, the salaries are not a problem. But if we can't really negotiate work rules, then you have to play a little bit hardball in terms of trying to look at what you could outsource. Because it's the work rules and then, of course, the benefit costs that go with ours. So our marginal cost of an employee is too high, which that means these benefit costs or fixed costs that are coming along when you hire a municipal employee. So we need to look at those costs as well. Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
At the firm where I am senior partner and CFO, we've looked at this issue for our business. We can outsource some of our work to foreign countries, India in particular, or Hong Kong, or we can hire subcontractors that we don't have to pay their health benefits. And, you know, every situation is different, but we keep coming to the same conclusion. It is definitely cheaper, but it is not better. I would rather have an employee who is dedicated to the mission that I'm on rather than a hired hand that's going to disappear the first time we say there's a contract renewal. Now, there are, of course, some caveats here. Quite frankly, the internal workforce, the ones that work for the city or for our business, they have to remain competitive. And they know that they have to remain competitive. It's not like a threat. It's like part of the business mission that they are on. They know they have to remain competitive and provide value. And of course, there are some specialized areas where the city could never be efficient and effective at delivering service. And to use a simple but obvious example, we need to outsource our external auditor. That's definitely something that has to be outsourced. But nonetheless, I come back to this. You know, we're going to drive for lower costs, changing the work rules to become more effective so that we are competitive. But I say cheaper is not always better.
Mr. Zito, you have 45 seconds.
Okay. Well, the Stamford Police Department is now working without a contract. And we're getting back at our custodians. That past contractor is out of here. He should have been out of here a long time ago. We paid that gentleman a lot of money, our tax dollars. I think that if we keep our custodians in-house, all Stamford people, some have to live out of town because due to the fact of rents and all that. If we can make our renting, our people that own homes, give them a tax break so we can keep people here in Stamford to work, I'd love to do so. Just let's keep the work in Stamford. That's what I would like to do, no privatizing. Keep our people working. Thank you.
Would anyone else like another chance? The issue of transparency, I'm sorry, let me, Mr. Videlli, this question's to you. Start. The issue of transparency in city government has arisen in recent years. What is your philosophy about open government? Is it appropriate to do business behind closed doors, and if so, when?
Well, I believe transparency is very important in city government, actually in almost everything that we do in life. There are situations such as personnel-related issues and things that may be related to court issues that you may not be able to be as transparent as you need to because of the confidentiality prior to going to court or personnel issues. But I think overall, you, the citizens of Stamford, need to believe in what's going on, need to understand what is going on in your city government. At the 10th floor, the mayor's office, all the way down to the Board of Representatives, the Board of Education, Board of Finance, and everywhere in government. There are some unique situations, as I mentioned earlier, where that may not work, it may not come to play. But I think that's the cornerstone of who we are as a government. And I think one of the things that will happen in a Fidelity administration is to digitize as much of our information as possible so that our citizens can have access via the internet to look at records, data. I know we do some recordings of meetings to make sure that all the meetings are recorded and people have access to it via the different medias that we have here. So transparency is a very big word nowadays, but it's always been important. It's always been important in my life and very important in how we run the city. Thank you, Steve.
Ms. Murphy?
Thank you. Well, transparency is, I think, key. I think there's a lot of suspicion about what actually is going on in these private meetings, and actually, whether it's at the leadership at the Board of Reps or in our small board on the Board of Finance and the caucus group. I know that's legitimate legally, but they come out and there's a vote and no discussion. I think the citizens really lose in having open discussion on the issues. I think the city, it's a disgrace. The city has so many FOI, Freedom of Information requests going through. And again, it's because you can't get the information. It's not on the website. And there's certain records that, again, my theory is you give the information and people will be much happier and less suspect. Recently, the city and the Board of Finance, I did not vote for this, hired an attorney just to handle FOI requests. So we're paying an attorney, including with benefits, to read emails that have been requested through the FOI. We are spending a lot of money to protect our information. They just went through a change on with the web page, and actually they removed a lot of the historical records and some information. And then the most embarrassing for me, of course, is the Board of Finance. You can hardly find our agendas and our postings and meetings. So it's, I think we've been going a little bit backwards, actually, in transparency. But we do have to be much more open, and I think that we'd build more confidence, I think, if people knew exactly what went behind our votes and our thinking. Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
Transparency, well, let's put it this way. An informed public is really the cornerstone of democracy. And transparency is part of making certain the public is informed through the media or through the citizens' own efforts. Unfortunately, I'm grown a little bit cynical about this. Transparency is just a word thrown around by politicians at election time, but it doesn't actually mean very much. So how do I feel about transparency? When I was on the Board of Reps, for the first time ever, we published all of our agendas. We published all of our minutes. We published all of our votes. We published all of our attendance. It was all on our website. We started recording our meetings, and that was the beginning of recording meetings. We started publishing all the documents that we got. And if you went to the website and you clicked on the agenda, you could click on through to the documents. We were the first to publish the budget. In fact, I was told one year when the budget came down, I said, I want to put it on the website. They said, you can't do that. I had published the budget within 24 hours. I believe in transparency. I believe it's the way that government should be at its core. In 8 years, I had one Freedom of Information challenge to the Board of Reps, and it was dismissed with a simple letter. We're now spending $150,000 a year fighting freedom of information. I believe in transparency, and as mayor, we will have it.
Mr. Zito?
Transparency. Very good. I'm going to have an open door policy. We all know that. My door will be off the hinges, like Mayor LaClaps did. No private meetings. Mr. Pavey is having now private meetings. Certain board members. We don't need that. Why are we hiding? There should be nothing to be hidden from the taxpayers, from anybody. I would like to make the website easier for seniors to get on, to find out what they need to see, what else is going on. There should be no privatizing for the public, because people need to see what's going on in Stamford. And that's what I would do. Thank you.
Ms. Murphy, this question is to you. A former mayor of New York famously asked the public, "How am I doing?" How will you get feedback on your performance so we'll know how you are doing in your administration?
Well, that's a good question. I think hopefully the taxpayers will see it in much more fiscal discipline, and when they'll see it in terms of really the performance of our boards and commissions, I would plan to put people who are really qualified on our boards and commissions, and the requirement there that would be that and I would give them also, what we don't do now, I think sufficiently, is give them an orientation so that on all our boards and commissions, we would have people who were knowledgeable of what their responsibilities were. They would not be cronies, and they would not be political operatives. We would have real people who stood on principle, and I would also probably offer to have them have some counsel, legal counsel, who would be to advise them on their legal responsibilities and their authorization, what they're authorized to do. I think, obviously, the fiscal discipline. If we could get our house in order, start addressing these unfunded liabilities, our pensions, and that is something that's been kicked down the road by all the parties for decades, and not only in Stamford. But we can't further kick the cost of the pension, the promises we made for pension and retirement benefits. So I hope that people would see a very much open government. They would see the transparent government. We wouldn't be spending all the legal cost, and we would have a very ethical government. So I think the number of ethical challenges, et cetera, would be reduced. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Martin?
Well, I'm going to have Mayor's Night In, or Mayor's Night Out. We're going to restore that. And the mayor is going to go out to various communities and meet with the people and hear what they have to say. We're going to have Mayor's Night In so you can come to the government center and meet with the mayor, and you can tell the mayor what it is that you have to say. We are going to have electronic town halls. So every so often, you don't have to meet the mayor out in the Glenbrook Community Center or the Long Ridge Fire Station. You can meet the mayor electronically with some of the webcasting capabilities. And I think we can do all of that to increase the communication back and forth. But that's not all. I intend to begin presenting the budget to the public and letting the public respond to the budget before it is submitted to the Board of Finance and the Board of Representatives. That's what the Board of Education does now. And I've attended many of those budget meetings where the superintendent presents their budget to the public, and I think it's constructive to hear what the public has to say about the budget before it's submitted. On another note, which it's related, is that we are going to have an anonymous tip line for people to call in when they have a concern or complaint about what they think might be wrong with something illegal or unethical, and we'll have a way to handle that. That was something that was recommended several years ago after the scrap metal scandal, but it just hasn't been done. And we're going to do that so that you can communicate anonymously about the issues that you see facing Stamford.
Mr. Zito?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. A former mayor of New York would famously ask the public, "How am I doing?" How will you find out from the public how you're doing in your administration?
Hopefully they tell me I'm doing a great job. How am I doing? Well, I like to have a meeting once a month open to the public. Meet everybody. Come down and see me. If I'm in the road, in the street, out walking, talk to me like I said in the past. I'm always got ears. I'm always open. I'll stop and write down your questions that you have. You know, going around in the past as a child, seeing different mayors walking around downtown. Hey, Dad, there's Mayor so-and-so. There's Mayor, shaking your hand. You know, we got to bring the old days back. Go meet people. Walk the neighborhoods. Instead of being set behind an office or driving around to this meeting, that meeting, take a break once in a while. I'm here for the taxpayers. I'm not a politician. I'm a working man. I'd rather go out and meet people, do what I have to do. Waterside Coalition. I was out picking garbage up. Southfield Avenue, Selleck Street. I don't see nobody else doing that. I'm a people's people. I'm here to win it. Go for it all. Thank you.
Mr. Fidelli?
Thank you, Steve. Individuals who are afraid to ask that question know the answer already. And I think it's behooving upon the mayor, in this case Mike Fidelli, to make sure that that answer is you're doing a great job. And that means doing the right things for the citizens of Stamford. And I can tell you that having served in government in many capacities over 18 years, that people aren't shy. You all come up to you in the coffee shop, the cleaners, and tell you how you're doing or how you can do better. And I think it's important to listen to those folks. And many of the technologies and things that we've talked about are good. And I think in this administration we would continue or increase and implement them. The confidential help tip line was something that I worked on in a board that I was on in the healthcare industry to make sure it's there. It works. People aren't afraid to make the call. But I think in being able to have someone answer that question honestly, you have to get in there and do the right job, irrespective if you do it at the Mayor's Night Out, Mayor's Night In, Skype, whatever, WebEx, webinars, whatever you do. The real key is what are you doing to make people answer that question. And Ed Koch, who was the gentleman who used to say that, was very confident about the job he was doing, very confident about what he was delivering. And I would do the same thing. Thank you.
Well, for what it's worth, I think you're all doing well tonight. Your next, the next panelist is John Brunick.
Thank you all for coming. This question is for Mr. Martin. We've all heard your positions on the boatyard, and tonight I'm not asking any of you to repeat them. But what can the city learn from its experiences with building and land technology that can shape future dealings with developers?
You know, BLT is transforming the South End, and it's looking great, and I'm hoping it will be successful. I want it to succeed. But what's happened is that the city has reached the point where developers are running the show. And it's not just that they run the show when it comes to negotiations, like we saw in this recent boatyard deal, but in fact the city isn't even enforcing the deals that have been made. And now what's happening is a number of people, and legitimately so, are becoming angrier and angrier, in my opinion, about what developers are allowed to get away with. And I want BLT to succeed. I want them to be successful. But I am going to enforce the agreements that are in place. And we are not going to allow people to continue to bend the rules or do some of the things. And if it's the people in City Hall that let things go past, then there's going to be accountable in City Hall. You know, we need a no-nonsense form of government. It's not to be spiteful or mean. It's just that everybody has to follow the rules. And that's what I see. It's wasted a huge amount of time, a huge amount of effort, and led to a lot of discourse. We need to move forward in a constructive way, but everybody's got to follow the rules.
Mr. Zito?
BLT. BLT done a great job for the city of Stamford. Yes, they did. Getting to the boatyard, well, that's a touchy situation. I think we need a boatyard back here. But BLT building and what they're doing is fine. But again, our permits, we need to raise our permits. Stick behind the permits. Find out what they're doing when they pull a permit. Are they knocking the building down? Are they digging the trench right? I'm a tradesman here. Again, I'm not a politician. I'm a tradesman. I'm a working man. I'm out in the ditch. I pull my permits. I do the job the right way. Not, oh, we're doing this, we're going to do that, and all of a sudden knock down a building or a building caught on fire. BLT is doing a job on an old general rebuilding, refacing it. I asked the building department, how are we doing that with the permits and how is that being updated? And they're being on the ball. Our building department needs help, pulling permits and all that. These guys are out here hustling and bustling. They're men down. You know, during some of the storms, our building guys, zoning guys are out here driving around, making sure things are properly. When BLT's building this, building that, tide waters are coming in, now they want to build a boatyard over on Davenport Street. They're moving things around. As of mayor, I'll be behind everything, watching the zoning board, the permit department.
Thank you.
Time's up, sorry.
It's fine. Thank you for respecting the time. Mr. Fideli.
Thank you, John. I believe what's happening down in the South End is transformative, very similar to what happened in Stamford in the 60s, for those of you who were here. But your question was, how do we avoid the contention and the issues that occurred? And I think one of the questions that Mr. Bowling mentioned earlier about transparency, creating a system of government, creating boards and commissions, putting people on these boards and commissions that have transparency, people from our diverse community who bring a specialty to particularly land use boards, that are not only looking at Stamford as we go forward relative to development, but Stamford as we are a community, a city, a town of neighborhoods, and taking that in balance and interest. And I think as mayor, it behooves us to put boards together that do that, believe in transparency, understand the issues that are going forward, and boards that have a diversity that our city is made up of. And I think if we move down that road and are open to individuals and have people on the boards that can look at these issues, I think some of the challenges that are there. As mayor, I take an oath of office to uphold the laws and statutes of the state of Connecticut and the city of Stamford. And that doesn't matter if you're in the building world, if you're putting a deck on your backyard or you're building a 15-story building. The rules are the rules. And we do have boards that you can go to look for those modifications, but we need to make sure that we have the boards in place that will have that transparency and working with folks.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy.
Thank you. I think we've learned a lot of lessons, and one of them is obviously that, you know, money speaks in this town. So we've got to just break the, we've got to make sure our zoning and planning boards and the influence of the governor is such that, you know, we are controlling what's going on here in terms of development. Actually, even before the development started down there, and again, it looks nice and it's cleaned up, but it wasn't really planned out that well. We should always be looking at what is the impact on the residents and on our city. And for the BLT transaction, basically, and I believe that it's really low-income housing for Manhattan. So, you know, we're having housing problems and costs are going up, but what we've built here was low-income housing for people who work in Manhattan. The rents are up, and it's fine. We're in an advantageous spot there, the express train out of New York. So we built low-income housing. The way those folks were displaced who live down there, we're overcrowding in the Cove. We've pushed all of the housing and rental prices up here. So that was very bad. And this developer, you know, had a deal on the property and violated one part of the deal one after the other in terms of tearing down the boatyard to start with, and now they're not even paying their sewer connection fees. They stopped negotiating, they're suing not to pay connection fees. This developer, we'll have a case study on it to show these are the things that you should not be doing, and this is what you need to plan.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Rebuttal, David.
Yes, I just wanted to add one other thing that I think that we should have learned and we sometimes forget. When we do large economic deals with big developers and big corporations, and you know, we are forced to give tax incentives, and I don't like it, but let's be real, it's necessary sometimes to attract large corporations. And we give zoning variances. Part of the deal is not just some jobs that are promised out 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 15 years from now. Part of the deal is the construction jobs that we're supposed to get up front. And what we failed to do was make certain that in this deal, we got the construction jobs for the people here in Stamford that they deserve, instead of having all those license plates from Texas and Utah. And that was a mistake that we made.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Thank you. Mr. Zito, I'll start with you for this next question. Various subsidies and incentives have been used to lure large corporations to move to Stamford. One of the benefits promised was a lower tax burden for homeowners. Some critics have questioned whether homeowners have received this benefit. I'm sure some members of this audience are among those critics. Has it been worth it for the taxpayers of Stamford to grant these incentives, and would you favor continuing this strategy?
No way. No way. I live with my sister. She's 83 years old. It's hard. I help her. I do what I got to do for her. Not only for me, other people out here. I will not do this. We have corporates that have been coming in here since I've been going to high school on Longridge Road. One day I go by, there's a new name on the board. A year or two later go by, there's another name on the board. The taxpayers, we're taking a beating on that. Our past administration, they destroyed us. And now a new mayor is going to come in. We have to sit down. The word on the street is RBS is going to take off, or UBS is going to take off. What are we going to do with that building that we got there that we gave them a tax break on? And we all here have to suffer for it. It's not fair. So as a new mayor, and my candidacy, my board members that I will have with me, we will sit back and sit on this and look in the future. What can we do? No more taxes for the big guys coming in. We'll give them some, not enough, what they think they're going to get. Our Governor Malloy, he gave a tax break to our company coming out of New York for Greenwich. I think it was $50 million. I don't know if I'm right about the money. Only promised 100 jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fedeli.
Thank you, John. You know, I'm going to take you guys down memory lane. For those of you who remember, I've already referred to it, Stamford in the 1960s in the downtown. And if you recall, prior to redevelopment, what the downtown looked like. So the question I asked those of you who remember, and those of you who are here today, if we didn't undertake that redevelopment and didn't entice corporations to come into this, where would Stamford be and where would the downtown be? Now, that doesn't mean we do a wholesale giveaway to who we are as a city. We have the ability to work to bring corporations in here, corporations that create jobs. It's just not about taxes, it's about the jobs that they bring in here. Corporations today pay 36% of our tax bill, of that pie. So the question is, if we did not have those corporations, who would make up that 36% difference? I think it's important to have a balanced, stable economic development plan, one that works. But I also believe, John, that you need to have an economic plan that keeps the companies here, so that after their incentives are gone, this is still the city they want to do business in. So it's not just attracting new business, it's also keeping the businesses here.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy?
I'm not in favor of the incentives that are being offered or have been offered here in Stamford. Years ago, when I was in the private sector, we placed plants like in Dixon, Tennessee, 2 miles outside of Raleigh. It was nothing there, nothing. And we did get some tax incentives, and that was probably a proper allocation. We are 30 miles outside of New York City. We're on the shoreline here on Long Island. There's no reason why corporations shouldn't. They should want to relocate here. I think the problem is, again, we shouldn't be, if we had a city that was attractive, when we have to make that city attractive, have it fiscally stable, have where it's not known as a pay-to-play, that when you come in, you know that when you're looking for zoning, permitting, or as far as you're going to get equal treatment, depending, no matter who you are. Those are important, and more importantly, even that there will be a good school and transportation system. So we have a lot of problems that are not going to get fixed by just bringing more corporations in here. We've got to deal with our root problems, which are the congestion, et cetera. And I think I think some of these tax incentives, we never get the benefit. They never create the jobs. And by the time that they actually start paying full taxes, they've depreciated the properties by so much that we're not getting the economic benefit from that we expect. In this last reval, RBS, UBS had got significant reductions in their taxes. Well, many, many people got more double-digit increases. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. You know, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this very important question. And I'm going to say right off, a lot of people have been promised over and over and over again, we're going to bring in these big corporations and it's going to lower your taxes. We're going to get building permit fees and it's going to lower your taxes. And it just hasn't happened. And when I sit down and start scratching out the numbers that I understand from a disciplined economic analysis, I don't think it's lowering our taxes at all. I think that's a promise that's been made that could never have been kept. But that's half the story. There is another half the story, and that is that Fairfield County is not a low-cost place to do business. And over the last 50 years, our manufacturing, whether it's skilled or unskilled, has moved out of Stamford. And if we had just lost that manufacturing, then we wouldn't have any jobs at all. So they are coming in and they are bringing jobs, but unfortunately, we're not really strategizing on the type of jobs that we want to bring in and how we are going to incent them. If this is all about the lowest price you can offer to a corporation, then the next deal that comes along 5 years or 10 years later, of course they're going to leave. The question is, what can we do to make this a better economic climate? Well, we've got to create an education system that delivers the people that have the education to fill these jobs. We need to solve our transportation problem. And if we do that, companies are going to come here on their own.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? No. Thank you. Mr. Fedeli, I'll start with you for the next question. Traffic and congestion are major issues in the city at a time when future levels of federal aid for local projects are uncertain and at a time when the city is without a transportation planner. What would be your strategy for addressing traffic issues in our city?
Well, John, one of the things we need to do is take a look at the overall traffic plan that we have here in the city and look at all of the intermodal opportunities that are available to us in the city. We've talked about bike lanes. It's something that's very simple, I believe, to implement if you put it in your plan. We've talked about having smaller buses doing more loops to help people from transit, in mass transit from the train station. We have a transportation center right now that possibly could undergo some changes, which I'm currently not in favor of because I don't believe it does anything for the commuters. It doesn't provide the parking that's required that our commuters want. What it does is gives you the same, or basically about the same amount of parking spaces and a nice hotel and retail. I'd like to see more parking, and actually in a rail administration, we proposed that in one of our plans to add more parking there that would have addressed the commuter problems and would have eliminated the whole waiting list. It's working with corporations and their minivans to see how we can best utilize those shuttles. One of the problems we have right now down at the transportation center is early morning and late evening. It's a mess down there because everybody trying to move shuttles. There's maybe a better way to coordinate that. So as mayor, we'd have to get with our economic development people, our traffic folks, and put together a plan that kind of ties this whole thing. It can't be hodgepodge, because if it's hodgepodge, you're not going to have the seamless flow that we all want. And obviously also timing the traffic lights, which I hear all the time from folks out in the city. Thank you.
Ms. Murphy.
Well, traffic congestion obviously is actually a deterrent for companies to move here, and it's a frustration for anyone who has to drive through here, getting to New York and then getting home. I think my number one thing I wouldn't be putting 2,000 more cars down on the 14 acres in the south end. I think again, the developers, BLT in particular, I think they were involved with the Gateway. That road, when we closed Henry Street, it was parallel to Pulaski. It was really one of the most important roads to keep open and build a bridge for evacuation. I believe that we're not going to get the state and federal money to start fixing expanding the under canal and under Atlantic. So we have to be safe and be thinking about how do we evacuate that many people off of that point. Already it's going to be a big issue. So again, throughout the city, we have to really be working with the on the traffic plan. Well, I think we need a better traffic planning department. I don't think we really know a lot about traffic in our city. It seems to be quite a hodgepodge. So we would need some professional people to look at what we can do, if there are places that we can put bike lanes. Obviously, it would be nice to have bike lanes, but I think we've got to deal with more fundamental problems, because I think the Stamford is people are more running away from it because of the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
You know, we were talking a little bit before about the commercial development and which direction we go, and I said if we could fix our transportation problems and give education to put the right workers in place, they would come to us. You know, a major failing has been that this state, Fairfield County, and yes, even our city, has not really planned for its transportation infrastructure, and we've got way too many buildings for the capacity of our roads. We have a 29% vacancy rate right now in our commercial office buildings, and I-95 is already clogged, the Merritt is clogged. How are we ever going to fill up those buildings? And if we fill up those buildings, maybe we could get our taxes down. You know, at the AARP forum last week, I announced that, first of all, I was for complete streets, which is to make the streets more pedestrian-friendly and more bicycle-friendly. I am, in fact, a member of an organization that believes in that, and we are behind compared to other cities and what the country is doing. I said that it's time to improve the timing of the lights. I'm tired of sitting at a red light on Summer Street or Washington Boulevard, and I see greens ahead and greens behind. I get the green, and I pop up one more light. It's time to end that. And I said that I'm going to bring back the transportation planner. We're failing in our transportation planning. You know, dropping the transportation planner, I believe, was a mistake. This takes a long time to change these things, but you've got to get started, and we need that.
Thank you. Mr. Zito.
I'll jump right on this one.
You ready for
this? This is definitely a good one. Well, we all know which bridge gets flooded in Stamford. I don't know if my candidates know. Every one. I go through it. And sometimes, lucky I didn't get stuck. But traffic problems are definitely. I like to get the speeding cut down. We had a lady this weekend hit and run on Weed Avenue. All right? We could put a sidewalk there. Again, we could put a sidewalk there. We get donations. We can cut in and put a sidewalk there. That's definitely. Speed is going to need to be cut down. Our police officers are out there working. The police cars have a radar device on them, tells you if your tags are expired or not. I like to see more speed traps out there. Some side roads have speed bumps. They're working out great. Houston Terrace, where I live, we got speed bumps there. Years ago, I put a plank across the street because people were flying up and down the street. It stopped them. It stopped them. Trust me, it stopped them. As of the railroad station, the parking lot that they want to build for us, it's no good. They want to put a hotel up there. That's not going to work. It's not going to. We don't need another hotel. We don't need another empty office space. We need to redesign that parking lot and that garage to take care of our commuters here. I have good people right now that's in Stamford Zoning Board. We do have good people working for us. I have a very good person in there that will back me up and straighten out the parking.
time?
And time is out. I was going to go, but I'm not.
Thank you. Rebuttal,
I was just
David.
going to add, that transportation planner is just not for long-term planning. We've talked a little bit about the transportation center. So John, the head of our zoning, planning and zoning, comes into the Board of Finance and said, the city of Stamford has no input, has had no input into that transportation center planning. We have not taken the initiative, and that's part of what that transportation planner is supposed to do. The second thing I wanted to mention is that, yes, we've shelved all the traffic calming. We need to get back to traffic calming, particularly in the side streets, the back streets where the children play. It's something that we need to restore. Thank you.
John, I think that the mayor, with respect to the transportation center, needs to get involved in what's going on there. Currently, the state believes that the city has no input to the design that is going on there because it is a state project. And I would tend to disagree, and I would tell you I think they're wrong. and they're wrong on many fronts, but probably the most important one, even if they weren't wrong, is this is a local project that helps our region, even though it's owned by the state. And as mayor, I would fight to make sure in that government transportation plan that we have in the transportation center that we would have an input on traffic, we would have an input on design, and hopefully some say in what goes there, and hopefully open up this real secret project that hasn't really been overly transparent for our citizens.
I wanted to add that actually the Director of Economic Development was on a secret panel for Norm Cole presented to the Board of Finance that, and when we were trying to find out more information on that, what was going on down there, he told us that, well, we have a representative, our Director of Economic Development, but she's sworn to secrecy, so he couldn't get any information, and therefore he couldn't share any with us. So again, this secrecy about what's going on down there, we have a lack of confidence in what's going on with the city for this and many other reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.
Secrecy. Well, secrecy. Not in my book. Like again, I'll tell you again, my door is open. No secrets in my book. We got a great sign department in the city of Stamford. These guys do one heck of a job. 4 o'clock in the morning, they're out there striping our streets. I see them. I go and stop and get them a cup of coffee, box of donuts, while they're out there striping. I think we can straighten out the street, the traffic problem also with signs hanging. You pull up, the markings are gone. If we put signs up, it'll help people, which way to go and how to do it and everything. But again, getting back to timing of the lights also, that's another bad thing. Trust me, it's bad. And my time is up.
Thanks again.
Panel, candidate, your next panelist is Lisa Mercurio.
Good evening. This first question is for you, Ms. Murphy. There are 10,000 fewer jobs in Stamford today than there were in 2000. What would be your role in encouraging business growth in the city?
Well, I think we've got to make it much more business friendly. I think the small business obviously is more of an engine for keeping, for bringing jobs and growing jobs, keeping jobs here. So I think we have to encourage smaller business. The enterprise zone that was put in place was created to, in the city, gave tax incentives. It was intended to be used for the small business and to grow local businesses. Those areas, though, were quickly filled up with UBS and RBS and BLT. So we've got to make sure that when we create these incentives, that they're actually being used for the kind of businesses that it was originally intended. I think as I said, to create jobs, we do need to have the workforce, and I think and business will come and grow if they have the right skilled workforce. And I think in some cases we lost ground. We lost the VOTEC school. That's coming back. That I think will be very good for business to get some additional skilled workers. I think I think we've got to encourage entrepreneurs to really, they've got to come up with good projects, good customer service, and good products. And then with some help, but probably not financial help from the city, but through these incentive programs from the state and otherwhere from the state or from the federal programs or from the banks, that we can help them get started, give them a hand up, not a handout.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
As we were discussing a little bit earlier, there's 3 things that you really have to do to have a good business climate before you start giving it away with, the low price offer. First of all, you have to have a great transportation infrastructure we've already talked about, but that's something that's necessary to really, and that's all of Fairfield County, but certainly for Stamford if we're going to be the economic engine. Secondly, the cities that are most successful have a great university. And with all due respect, the prior governor and lieutenant governor were not very friendly to expanding UConn, but now we have a plan in place to almost double the size of UConn and put in student housing over the next 10 years. We also have Sacred Heart coming to Stamford. And I think those things are going to help in terms of building the energy, the enthusiasm, the new ideas, and the people with the skills to fill jobs. Oh, and incidentally, it will lower the cost for many Stamford students who want a lower cost alternative than having to go to stores. So that's good too. But the last thing is that you need a concentration of businesses. You need a concentration of the right businesses. Right now we have financial services and we have digital media. We need to find something else, something that fits with our needs and that won't move out. Now that's going to be tough, but it's a new direction for how we're going to do economic development. But I remind you of this. When Bloomberg was asked which city was competing most with New York City, it was Stamford. And as mayor, I'm going to prove him right. We're going to get businesses here.
Thank you. Mr. Zito.
Repeat the question, please.
Sure. There are 10,000 fewer jobs in Stamford today than there were in 2000. What would be your role in encouraging business growth in the city?
Well, like we said before, that was already said, there's a lot of opportunities out there for the government. Listen, we got Obamacare. But if we get these individuals that want to start businesses down in Stamford here, let's help them. Let Stamford Mayor help them, his cabinet help them. Look into them, see what they want to do, how they want to do it. Help them with the application for a loan. Work with the banks. We have to do this to make the environment grow. Yes, UConn is building, but there's other gentlemen and folks in this room, in this town, own buildings on Summer Street. Can't mention their names, but they took the building from an office building that was empty and made it into apartments, lofts. Great job. I applaud them. This is what we have to do to Stamford. We just have to all work together, try to get small businesses built up here, not to cater to the big guys, but find out what they want, what we could do to keep them here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fedeli.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a great question because the prior question was, well, we don't want to do anything for anyone to come here. So how do we fill 10,000 jobs, right? You do it by having an economic plan that not only looks at attracting corporations to the city of Stamford, but you also, as I said earlier, have a parallel path in your economic and community development that looks at small business growth, looking at them to help get financing, looking at programs, working with our higher education system, using our innovation center, making them aware of what's available to them, putting together a better women, minority, and veterans-owned business program so that those small businesses can start. You know, in 1993, as a freshman legislator, I understood the value of UConn. If you'll recall, it was up here on Schofield Town Road. And it's great to see it downtown. I was happy to be on the task force that brought it downtown. But I can tell you, not everybody was happy to bring it down there. But thank God we did bring it down there, and that we do have a university system like UConn, that we have a university system like Sacred Heart University. See, I've done economic community development at the state level with our state things. I've gone overseas. I've gone to companies in the U.S. to bring them into Connecticut. And the first question is, besides the economic incentives, they're not low feeders, is where's my educated workforce? We need to do a better job there to making sure our students are trained in the pathway jobs that are available, not tomorrow, but 5 and 10 years. What's the quality of life? We need to make sure we maintain the quality of life we have here in Stamford, and what's the affordability? I've been there, I've done it, and I can do it as mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to, I think one of the things that I would do, and again, a month or so ago, the Federal Reserve banker from New York said, you know, that we're too concentrated in finance services, and I think that's the area that we compete with New York. My idea on the boatyard is actually to have a world-class marina and boatyard, and that would be a diversification of revenues, so we would be in a different industry, expanding on the tourism industry, leveraging up tourism here, and just like the development in Newport, it was the same, whether you build a boatyard, a world-class boatyard, or a corporate development in Newport, and they got their boatyard, and you could see the difference that it made. It really will create a lot of extra business in the city as we get world-class competition and boat racings into the Long Island Sound, and it would be a big diversification of our revenues, and I think that's critical to our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zito.
Well, getting back into how we bring work here to Stamford. I didn't close Right Tech. I wasn't on the board that closed Right Tech. Now Right Tech's open. Well, during those years that Right Tech closed, print, plumbing, automotive, auto body, beauticians, drafting, all those kids went to Stamford High School. I give Stamford High School applause for taking care of these kids. These kids passed going to college. Right now, I'm employing one of these young men as a plumber. We thank God Right Tech's opening back up again. We can get our future kids into Right Tech, learn a trade. That's our future right there. They can start their own business as a plumber, carpenter, framer, anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah,
Fidelli.
Lisa, for Mr. Zito, since he wasn't on the board, I'll tell him why Right Tech was closed. You had a school that had the capability of 155 freshmen supporting 40 freshmen going in every year. It was a school from Ozzie and Harriet days. It was a school that was built in the 40s trying to teach 21st century skills. So we were spending money and it wasn't going appropriately. So the school was closed to do a revamp on the curriculum, to put things like HVAC training, to put things in there like digital media. So it was put in there so that we can have a 21st century school. The good news is the committee, the board that Mr. Zito referred to, did come out with that report. That curriculum report is in place, and now you know what type of school you're going to build. Old Right Tech had auto shop. This Right Tech will not. So there's no reason to rebuild it with car lifts if you're not going to have it. So I'm very happy that it's going to be open in 2014, accepting 145 new students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
I was also very disappointed to see Right Tech close, and while what Mr. Fidelli says is true, it's only half the story. And so here's the rest of the story. The school was neglected, despite the fact that the legislature had already approved capital funds to revamp that school, and Mr. Fidelli himself had announced in a press conference almost 2 years before it closed that he was going to be part of the planning to keep that school open. But that planning never came to anything. And in fact, the school did close, even though the legislature and the State Board of Education wanted to keep it open. And the most telling thing was that the Rell administration seemed to be interested in selling that property off to a private developer. And when the Stamford delegation, both Republicans and Democrats, put forth legislation to protect that property so that it could continue to be for a school, Mr. Fidelli, you opposed that legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Fidelli.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, Mr. Martin obviously has his facts wrong. The school was closed more than anything because of the enrollment. You had a school that you were spending at least $1 million a year on for 44 students. We needed to upgrade that school. That school was closed. A curriculum plan was put in place to reopen the school. Individuals from our town, Jack Conlon, who's the president of the chamber, was the president of that board. Joshua Starr, who was the superintendent of schools, was on that board. There were a number of people from Stamford on that board to pick curriculum that was important. Once that curriculum was picked, we then knew what kind of school you were going to build, and that's what we're doing right now. We're building the school. So unfortunately, Mr. Martin has his facts wrong there. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Fidelli, you're trying to rewrite history. I mean, that school was neglected by the Ralph Fidelli administration. They had the money to renovate the school, and you promised that you were going to do the planning to make certain it opened. Stayed open as a 4-year school. That was a full year before Governor Rell started pushing to close the school. And the facts is that there are emails talking about closing that school and selling the property off to a private developer. And both Republicans and Democrats in the Stamford legislature were in favor of legislation to stop that, to protect that property so that it could be reopened. And you were furious, or at least that's the way I read the press reports of the time, that they would do that. They would block the attempts to close that school and potentially keep that school. And that is the record, and you can look it up on Google or any place.
Okay. Ms. Murphy, please.
I just want to weigh into this. I think the certainly the loss of the school was detrimental to a number of our young people trying to finish the programs they started. And I think part of the problem is the fact that we only have 44 students in it was really because of the courses that were offered. I know a young man, he was trying to get his plumbing license, and they didn't ever offer the course, or when the night they would offer the course that he needed to get his work towards his license, it wasn't offered. So eventually he had to drive to, I think, to Danbury to get his finish his coursework. So the curriculum was also, not only the facility was neglected, that curriculum was deficient, and a lot of the students who counted on that school, the classes weren't offered when they needed them, even when they were within 2 classes of getting their the hours they needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can make mine short,
Okay.
real short. I do not want to leave the Stamford Public School workshop teachers out of this. I went to West Hill. There's a teacher here in the audience, very good teacher. I had an automotive teacher in West Hill, woodshop teacher, went to Rippewam, had a good metal shop teacher there also. Stanford teachers that are doing the trades are doing a very good job. Stanford High took these kids from Right Tech. They did a very good job. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'd like to go on to the second question, and Mr. Martin, I'm going to start with you. It has been reported that 80 Stanford employees passed the salary mark of $100,000 in 2010.
I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear that.
That's sorry. 80 Stanford employees passed the salary mark of $100,000 in 2010, it has been reported. In 2012, 613 city workers, or roughly 19% of the workforce, passed that six-figure mark. In addition, personnel costs of retiree health care and post-employment benefits are planned to increase by at least 12%. Is this sustainable? What will your approach be to negotiating with unions on city contracts?
Well, of course it's not sustainable. I mean, if even in just the post-employee retirement benefits where you're talking about health care, I mean, that's one of the issues, is the health care inflation that's been going on in this country for 20 years is not sustainable. You know, if it continues at this rate in the next 20 years, we're going to be nothing but doing health care. And it's certainly true in our city. And so I'm going to be very aggressive about negotiating to keep the salaries down and under control and keep employee benefits under control. You know, it's now, and Ms. Murphy sometimes quotes different numbers, but we have $200 million in unfunded liabilities. Now, what I commit, my objective, is that, and those liabilities are becoming due. They were incurred 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and they were incurred in similar cities and municipalities all across the country. But they're coming due as the baby boomer generation is starting to retire, and we're going to have to start paying those. My commitment is that I'm going to reduce those obligations by the time I leave as mayor. I'm not claiming I'm going to erase them overnight, but part of it is through negotiation, and that negotiation is to get a fair reduction in some of the commitments, but more importantly, improvements in productivity. If I can make the employee twice as effective through the negotiation of the work rules or bringing in technology, then we can begin to offset some of those high costs that we have. But quite frankly, no, it's not sustainable, and we've got to work on it.
Great, thank you. Mr. Zito.
Well, we all know how the economy is, Mr. Martin just said. Yes, we have to look into our city benefits. As of mayor, I'll be shopping around for different insurance holders, just like the big corporate does. They shop around. They look for better deals, try to keep the deductible down for our employees. I mean, it's public view. You can see it. You can get it. Me and my committee will work together strongly and with the union leaders that are on for our town employees and try to get together, sit at a table. Let's get on the internet. Let's find an opportunity to get our benefits down, keep the tax costs down, because these people going home, they got to pay a deductible. We all here have to pay a deductible. But right now, deductibles that they have now are increasing, just like our economy is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fedeli.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, I think you used the operative word, negotiate. You have to negotiate these contracts. I believe the police department is now working with the contract that's 3 years out, the fire department's in arbitration, and the problem is the efficiencies that we talk about, the things that we need to look at, the sustainability component are in those contracts. And as mayor, you need to make sure when terms expire that you're negotiating in good faith for the citizens of Stamford. You also need to make sure that when your annual required contributions to your pension plan and things of that nature are made, that we as a city make those. They were at 50, 55%, only half of what we were supposed to make. They've been slowly eaching up to 65 and 70% under the current administration. So it's all part of, you know, when things come up, how do you get the efficiencies? How do you address the needs? How do you look at manpower deployment? Those are all components of our contracts with our unions. And unless you sit down at the table when they're coming due and come up with those things that will provide for the sustainability down the road, it's never going to happen. You just keep pushing it, pushing it, pushing it. And then 3-4 years later, you sign a contract, and guess what? You've just resolved the retroactiveness, and boom, everything comes back again. So I think it's important that the next mayor works on those contracts to make sure that they are being bargained in good faith, not only for the employees of the city of Stamford, but more importantly, the taxpayers of the city of Stamford.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy.
Well, we do have to work on these, especially on the fixed costs and on the work rules. And I agree, it has to be negotiated. But other municipals have been able to negotiate transactions where it was more fair, more sharing of the cost when you come to the medical benefits. I think part of the problem in our case is sometimes the attorneys that we have representing us in those contract negotiations. And I know in one of the contracts, whatever they get, whatever the opposite side gets, the legal group will participate in the same benefits. So I think I think we'd be a lot smarter to have outside counsel negotiate a lot of our union contracts. But the salaries increase and the ballooning and these expenses, a lot of it's the work rules, and the work rules are being abused. We also have, as we already know, they've got vacation records. They're on paper someplace. And so the payroll systems are basically, they're not, there's no controls, and they're broken. For the police department, a couple years ago, we had the Matrix study. The Matrix study came out with some very good recommendations, just dismissed out of hand by the administration. They have to be looked at. Some of these will be very effective, and I believe that the union will actually go along with them. The first response is always no. But I think the pension and benefits cost, we've got $500 million of pension and unfunded pension and retiree health liabilities. And on the retiree health liabilities, we don't even pay the interest on the past due amount. So we've got a lot of work to do in that area, and we can modernize our plans. I'd love to speak more on the subject.
Thank you. Mr. Zito.
Well, city is known, as we know right now, that the workman's comp is high in the city of Stamford. If we can take that workman's comp and lower it down for us, who's getting fake hurt, what's being taken, what's not being taken, if we concentrate on our security in Stamford and keeping Stamford running straight, not crooked like it's been. Stamford's been running crooked even before I was born. So as of mayor, I would like to have a meeting with the unions and see what we're doing out there. What are our employees doing? Have a meeting with all the city employees. That's what I would like to do. Get them down to West Hill High School or to the auditorium. Bring the employees. See what they want to do. But the only way we got to take this down, and this is our health problems that we're having with the health insurance and so far, I'd like to take it and shop around for it. Shop around for better benefits for everybody. They deserve it. They're people just like all of us. As of mayor and my cabinet, we will do so, and the door will be open.
Thank you. Rebuttals? Mr. Martin?
Yes, Ms. Murphy raises a good point. We're having a terrible time with our record keeping. You know, we have people in the benefits department who spend all their time trying to figure out what people's benefits are. It's time to bring in some modern technology. I think I saw in the preliminary information about our annual audit, which incidentally is late, which is another record-keeping issue, that they said that they're looking at the fire department to track the time that's available for vacation and sick days afterwards. And they've looked at 3 out of 4, and all 3 are wrong, or something to that effect. I mean, part of this issue is that we're not managing our business. And we've got to get our records together and start managing it proactively rather than it letting take over and do whatever anybody wants.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Mr. Fedeli.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, very interesting conversation we've just had here, and we've heard Ms. Murphy talk about and Mr. Martin talk about the police, fire, and actually Board of Education that uses still records management. And yet, all of the city has a chrono system. For those of you know, that's a time computerized system. And I believe it was last week or the week before on the Board of Finance agenda, where both Mr. Martin and Ms. Murphy sit on, there was a vote taken to implement Chronos and a Chronos Time Manager for those 3, and it died. I also found it interesting because I also read the audit financial report statement, and in there, both Mr. Martin and Ms. Murphy were called out on it to do something about it. So my point is, if this is a function of the Board of Finance, I think the Board of Finance needs to do something in those areas, particularly since they're aware of the concerns on the time management and the financial audit system.
Thank you.
Do you want to address that, or should I?
I'll take it first. I mean, I don't understand. I don't know when the vote was done on the Cronus system. Was it this month?
I believe it, I'm sorry.
Let me,
I couldn't ask. I'm sorry. That's against the rules. Sorry. I think I don't recall any vote on the Cronus system. The Cronus system is a hugely expensive system. I'm a believer in it, and I always have been a believer in it. The problem, we spend a fortune on Cronus, and we don't have the police, the fire, and the Board of Ed on it. We don't have, even where we have it, the managers don't even, and the people at the in the government center, they only have to swipe one way, not swipe out. And we have their assistants swiping the cards for them. It's totally abused the way it is. And again, we pay a fortune for it, and we have, I think, 20% of the employees on it. And when I say a fortune, $1 million. So it's not a cheap system. And as I said, it lends itself to abuse. I have been writing memos to try to stop some of this, and you cannot get it through the Democrats on our Board of Finance to get some of this corrective action. And I have memos if someone wants to see them and read them.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Just to provide a little factual perspective, the last Board of Finance meeting, unfortunately, was the night of the AARP forum, and there was no scheduling conflict, so Ms. Murphy and I were not there to act on that particular issue. I can tell you that I am in favor of this program, and when next time we have a Board of Finance meetings, I will certainly vote for that. But I'll have to say that the real issue that's been going on is, I came back to the Board of Finance after a couple of years not being in government. I have never seen so much confusion about financial records and record keeping. And suddenly our audits are being delivered late. That's an issue for the management. That's for the mayor and the management and the financial controls, and they're not giving us the information. And it's a tough, tough thing to get the information when they're not providing it.
Thank you, Mr. Fedeli.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, not being able to attend the meeting doesn't mean you can't talk to your fellow Democrats or Republicans on the board to say, this is important, let's get it voted. It was shot down unanimously. So I'm not, I don't disagree. They were at the AARP meeting. We can go to the videotape and look at that. But what I'd like to say is, being on the Board of Finance, being part of leadership, they could have gotten the message across, because this is important. And if it costs us $1 million and we save $5 million because we have proper record keeping instead of working in a book and trying to figure out, well, is it right or wrong? This is the 21st century, ladies and gentlemen. It's your money. It's your money. You should be concerned about the auditability of 3 big departments. Board of Education, #1 largest department, police and fire. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zito.
I'm not going to get into that one. But as Mrs. Murphy says about the time swiping, I got a lot of cronies out there. Who's taking somebody else's time card, swiping them in when they're late? It's happening. Know for a fact. I was at a country club changing their hot water heater, and I'm looking at their time card machine. This is very good. They use their hand. I didn't ask how much about that, they used their hand. Their handprint went on that. You know what? When I have that meeting with the city employees, I'm going to bring that up. And guess what? I'd rather pay $1 million for that machine than for the taxpayers in Stamford to get ripped off by overtime. Thank you.
Thank you. This will be the last rebuttal. Ms. Murphy.
Thank you. I just have to react to Mr. Fideli's comment in terms of it is very expensive. And the question is, that when I've asked, you know, how can we get all of the employees on the system? And they say you have to negotiate. I don't understand. They say even the middle managers, they say you cannot require them to swipe the card or you're going to have to pay them for overtime for all their night meetings. Every time, this system is so underutilized, but the people and the administration, and it's been there for both administrations, both the Democrats and the Republicans, they will not force people to use the Cronus system. And if it has to be negotiated, then it should be negotiated. It should be a priority to be, but it's never on the table in the negotiations either. So it is a system that I agree we should have a record-keeping system as sophisticated as Cronus, but we've got to get everybody on it to make it a payoff. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. Your next panelist is Claude Marest.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming to our debate. I've learned a lot sitting here and listening to all this, and I think the audience has learned even more. I'll be asking questions about education this evening, and the first question will start with Mr. Zito. By most measures, Stanford students are not as well educated as their peers elsewhere in Connecticut. Stanford students perform on average 300 points lower than students in neighboring districts. On CAPS and CMTs, the district students rank in the bottom 50% statewide. 4 years ago, I read the exact same statement at the Prometheum's Mayoral Debate. Since then, very little has changed. Some standardized test scores have increased marginally, others have decreased slightly. Are radical changes needed to make a change in Stanford Public Schools? Or are you satisfied with the progress of current approaches?
Not satisfied. We have teachers that fill out the applications to become teachers with masters. They got turned down. Why? I don't know yet. I'm not the mayor yet, but once I become mayor, we have a seat on the Board of Education. Mr. Pavia has a show there. I haven't seen him. I've been going there since May, June. We need to educate our teachers, hire more teachers. I was at West Hill today. Classes are overpopulated. We need more schools. I've been through the school system from kindergarten to 12th grade, and I was overpopulated classes. So if I become mayor of the city of Stamford, I'm on that board of education going to the meetings, I want to know why are these people not taking their applications. I know 5 of them. We got to see what's going on at the Board of Education. The trees need to be shaken up. Thank you.
Mr. Fideli.
Claude, you know, I don't disagree with some of the summations that you've made, but I do always have a problem when folks compare our school system to Greenwich, New Canaan, Darien. Completely different demographics. Completely different demographics. However, I would say to you that there's work to be done. And I think one of the key points is, as mayor, you need to sit at the Board of Education meetings, which I've also attended and plan on sitting in, and to be a spokesperson and a cheerleader for the students here in the city. We also need to find dollars, both at the city, state, federal level, and corporate level, to give children a preschool experience. We know how important that is. This year, for the first time, the Board of Education did a summer kindergarten for 6 weeks, where children going into kindergarten who did not have a pre-K experience went to this 6-week kindergarten. And actually, the results so far, early on, are very good. I think that's important. We also need to do work for our AP students, for the kids at the top of the class. We have some great students in this school system. We educate and graduate some students. Remember, when you talk about the surrounding towns, you're talking about graduating classes of 500. We graduate classes of 2,400 and larger. So, you can't compare us. We have work to do. As mayor, I will make it a focal point of my administration to work with the Board of Education, to work with the superintendent, to work with the students, to work with the administration, and most importantly, the parents, to make sure whatever solutions and decisions we have as a city, we're all working together. Thank you.
Ms. Murphy.
Just following up a little bit, our children have to compete with in the real world with the children who are going to be graduating in the schools in our neighboring Fairfield County communities. So, it's really important. It's a shame that we are in the bottom third, I think, of the municipal in the city in terms of we're an alliance district, so we get a little bit more money. Hopefully we're making good use of it. But I think we need radical change. I don't think there's a single silver bullet. I think one of the things I personally would like to see, but it's a little bit out of the box, I think we've got some very good schools that are performing pretty well and some schools that are not performing. And maybe we should maybe half of maybe the principals should change, and maybe half of the teachers could change, and we could see whether is it the teachers, is it something, I don't think we can lay the blame at the children. We have to figure out how to educate these children. So I would do more moving, not of the children, I would be moving some teachers around and I think the teachers' evaluation is critical. And the evaluation, I wanted to eliminate a person in the budget because the superintendent they've hired someone who's going to evaluate the principals and the teachers for her. And I think that's the superintendent's primary responsibility is the evaluation of the principals and the teachers. That's where our product touches the customer, the consumer, the parent, and the child. We should be pushing money down, spending money there, and evaluating constantly, are we doing the job that we're supposed to be doing there? And I would be pushing this evaluation, and I said, maybe moving some teachers and principals around. Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
It's a big question, Claude. So let me begin by saying, first of all, I'm glad that some of my opponents have started attending Board of Education meetings. I've been to many over the years. I've also been to Teacher of the Year celebrations and to the public hearings on the Board of Education budget and the opening day convocations. I've been in the schools talking to principals, looking at capital projects. I've even been sitting on the floor reading to first grade children. I am very committed to improving our schools, make no mistake about it. And when you quote those numbers, I think we have to break it down. And what we're going to find is that we have kids that are succeeding just as well as any of the surrounding communities, and we need to keep working on that and make that even better. And then we have other populations that are not succeeding. And so somehow we have to address that. I was the president of the Board of Representatives when I initiated the charter revision change that put the mayor on the Board of Education, and I'm going to take that responsibility seriously. And one of the things that I'm thinking about, which is a more direct response to your question, is in fact the Union City learnings that came from a session that was held by Stamford Achieves. The real message from Union City is steady wins the race. Don't succumb to theories of the day and change things every 5 minutes. Standard management, SWOT principles, and identify your weaknesses and fix them over time. And over time, you will have a great school system for all of your children, and that's what we've got to deliver.
Great. Rebuttal, Mr. Fedeli.
Well, talking about the Union City experience, I think we really have to look at it. And really, I think one of the interesting components of the Union City experience is that the Board of Education members are appointed by the mayor. Think about that. The mayor appoints like minds, and those like minds hire a superintendent who happens to be there for 10 years now, who has a 10-year blueprint. 10 years ago, 97% of the school was Latino, 30% graduated. 10 years later, 97% of the population is Latino, 80% graduates, 70% go on to higher education. So it's a blueprint, it's consistency. The question is, I believe, like minds, an appointed board, and a superintendent and mayor moving forward. The question is that something that's in the cards for Stamford and a charter revision to look at?
I would really like to hear from the other candidates what they think of Mr. Fedeli's suggestion of having the Board of Ed appointed by the mayor. Let's start with Mr. Zito.
I think all the boards, not only the Board of Education, all the boards sometimes need to be cleaned up. Board of Education, there's people on there 20 years. Things need to be cleaned up. I'm a new generation. I'm the second youngest mayor candidate in Connecticut. I think it's time for us as mayor, and whoever's voting now, taxpayers are voting, vote who you got going in as Board of Reps. Not your Board of Reps, excuse me, not your Board of Reps, Board of Education. There's two good candidates that I got on there that are very good, and I know them. Thank you.
Ms. Murphy?
I don't know, given the appointments I've seen made by mayors of the city, I don't think so. I think it's unfortunate. We need to get our electorate, our residents really out there and vote, really assess what these board members are doing. And quite frankly, we should be holding them much more accountable. I mean, this fact that we do have such low-performing schools hurts the value of our homes, hurts our economic development plans. And I think, we need to get this program, we need to get a program that works and I think we need, as I said, a little new blood there would be a very positive. I think there's no silver bullet, but we do have to get, and I think, I hear programs of the year, programs they want to do for, let's say, more pre-K. You can't argue you need more slots on pre-K, but they seem the kids at risk in the middle are a little bit lost. I think there's ideas in terms of really reducing the gap by teaching the people who come in 5th grade or 9th grade, non-English speaking, they should be taught the rudiment, and they have no basic rudimentary education. They should be taught those rudiments in English, writing, in their native language, and writing and math. And then they'll be able to translate that once they learn it. And I was told that one teacher is doing that in, I think it was Westover School, which shocks me is, do we have a different plan in every different school? So I think there's a lot of quality control that should be, would be useful in how we deliver our service and education.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, what do you think of the idea of the Board of Ed being appointed by the mayor?
Well, it was really quite interesting. At the forum held by the Stamford Achieves, the superintendent of Union City talked frequently about the importance and the favorability of having an appointed Board of Education. But if you stayed all the way to the end, the author of the book who wrote about Union City said you don't want an appointed board. The reason Union City likes it is because the mayor has appointed people that are friendly to education and are a champion in supporting education. But if you get a mayor who's going in the other direction, then suddenly you're going to have a board that's changed 180 degrees. And he pointed out, in my private conversations with him, that's part of the issue about suddenly changing direction. More fundamentally, I believe in democracy. And we make mistakes, I make mistakes, but I believe in democracy. And I think it's important, particularly in a diverse community like ours, that there is an opportunity for a diversity of people to be on the Board of Education and for the people to directly elect it rather than the mayor who might have a bias to one side or the other. I certainly would not, but the reality is that you never know what's going to happen, and sometimes you are blind to what you need to see until the people come up and say, this is who we want to be on the Board of Education. I think that that's a bad idea to have appointed Board of Education.
Mr. Fideli, would you like one last rebuttal before we move
Yeah,
on?
well, if you look at the Union City experience, there's consistency. They have a superintendent who was hired by an appointed board who was picked by the mayor. That board has been there for 10 years. That superintendent's been there for 10 years. We can't say that in Stamford. We've had a superintendent for 3 years left. We now have another superintendent. Board elections are every year, filling different terms. The question, Claude, was what do you do? And I think Mr. Martin said there's a consistency, there's a blueprint, there's a plan. Unfortunately, the way it's set up here, that's not happening. So that's why when Mr. Martin brought up the Union City experience, which I believe we all attended, at least I was there till the end, we talked about those things. And what I saw was a consistent superintendent, a consistent blueprint from that superintendent, a consistent message from that board and that mayor. Thank you.
The next question is going to go to Ms. Murphy. The Board of Education has discussed 5 different options for addressing the overcrowding crisis Those options are redistricting, portable classrooms, reconfiguration of which grades are in which schools, purchasing and retrofitting commercial buildings, and building a new school or schools. Which of these measures, if any, do you favor for addressing the overcrowding crisis, and why?
Well, I think they each need to be fleshed out a little bit more. I'd like to understand the economics, but I would like to have another one thrown into the mix. And in that, I think there are a number of private schools, and I've done a little bit of inquiry. There are a number of private schools that actually have empty slots. They could use some seats before they perhaps are in financial difficulty. So I would suggest we could have it's really a win-win. Let's assume that that we could have a lottery. It would be by choice. For parents to put their children in some of these private schools that would open seats. I can have identified at least 250 seats. There's probably more. But the city would actually save some money because in the interim, first of all, for the children, which is number one, they would actually be in a real classroom, not overcrowded, not in a portable. You know, they would actually have a real classroom with real teachers. And I think for the private school that's having some financial difficulty perhaps, they would actually be assured of more success, and they would be continued, because if they do fail, we'll have more kids coming back into our schools. And we would avoid perhaps the cost of building a new school. So the private schools survive, and they are employing they're employing Stamford residents and employing Stamford residents and educating Stamford students. The school system the taxpayer would have a break because the cost would probably be like $6,000 to $10,000 per student rather than the $16,000 that we're paying now per student. And again, we wouldn't have the cost of the school, the cost of building the school, which is the lowest part of the cost. The bigger cost after building the school is staffing the school, maintaining the school, putting construction. I guess I'm out of town. Sorry.
Mr. Martin.
I'd like to break it down into the short term and the long term. And guess what? The short term is right now. It's not the short term. We're already behind schedule. The short-term problem is that the elementary schools are already overcrowded, and they're only going to get worse this next year and the year after and the year after that. But then the projections are that it's actually going to decline a little bit, and we're going to begin to have a little bit more capacity in the elementary schools. There is a little bubble, or the mouse moving through the snake or boa constrictor type of phenomena going on, and eventually they're going to move on up into the high schools, and then we're going to have a long-term issue out 10 years from now, and that issue is a little bit easier to address. You know, we've got to pay very close attention to these numbers, and I'll explain why later. But in the long term, you can probably expand AITE and the program there, and you probably can get state money if you continue that type of program, so you'll have more room and more kids in your school. But the other thing is that the right tech will probably attract students from Stamford, and that will deal with the high school. But the immediate issue is the elementary. I wanted to build a school, and I wanted to put it somewhere that was where the density of most of our students' needs were. But after looking at this report, we can't build a school in less than 3 years or 4 years, and by that time, this problem is beginning to diminish. So we need to turn to things that provide immediate solutions, and in my rebuttal time, I will expand on that.
Mr. Zito, which solutions would you be in favor of?
In favor of? Well, we definitely need more schools. That's definitely. But we're short of property. I attended a meeting, board education meeting. Back in 1972, they were looking at properties. Clairol's at the time, we didn't know they were going to go out. They have warehouses. A lot of companies that have moved out. Board of Education looked and talked with the city about buying some property, thinking in the future. It slipped through the cracks. It went through the past administration, let it blow by. Me driving around the city of Stamford today, I found a piece of property someplace. I'm going to look into it. But again, we got crunch time. It's crunch time now. We need to build another school by next year. It's not going to happen. If I come mayor, me and my cabinet will get together, put our heads together, get the Board of Education, and get some taxpayers in there to see what we get some ideas from. My door is open. If a taxpayer could walk in, that's an architect that knows something, that can bring some positive to Stamford, Connecticut, so we can get the school districts going, great. Modulars, there was $5 million for a modular. We didn't know where to put them. I heard them saying that they want to put it in front of Rogers School. You can't do that. You'd be on Ludlow Street. There's no way. Roxbury School, we could put 4 modulars up in the baseball field. But again, do we want to put our kids in modulars? We have to get together and sort this out as a team. Not like the fire department going to the Stamford court system. That's not good.
Mr. Fedeli.
Claude, you know, I spent a considerable amount of time today speaking to parents and PTO members, and they're scared. And I feel bad for them because they have children in our school system, and our boards are telling them less than a year from now they're going to be an overcrowding problem. That's a planning issue, folks. We should not be here in this situation. This is the city of Stamford. My option is option 6. It's called the Mishkan Brule option. And what that option is to take a look at each individual school. We have 6 right now that are close to overcrowding. And look at each individual school's solution instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and redistricting and sending kids all over the city. Redistricting from 5th to 8th grade, moving families who have a child in 2nd grade and now moving their child to another school. Parents don't want that. In fact, parents want neighborhood schools like we used to have years ago when I was growing up, that you walked to that school and it was there. We know that's not the panacea anymore, but we do not want to bus our kids all over the city just because the city didn't do a very good job planning. And I do believe that not only do you have to start looking at the short term, which is the immediate problem that's facing the city September 14th, but the bubble. What do you do as you move on through middle school and high school? And also the curriculum that you're going to be teaching these students. I think it's one big package, and for too long, we really haven't done a good job as a city planning in that area. And one of the things I'm going to make sure that this city does as mayor is planning. Thank you, Claude.
We're going to do a round of rebuttals now, so you'll each get to say something. But I would like to hear some critique of some of the ideas that have been thrown around thus far. We'll start with Mr. Zito.
Well, I am a victim of getting transferred around schools. Stevens School, Roxbury, Willard. I got bussed all over the place. I don't want that. I don't want to see a young kid going into kindergarten and his brother's in 5th grade. I've been talking to a lot of family members. They're scared. They're tired of putting the kids on a bus, ship them all the way up to the Northeast School. That's not fair. Snowstorms, rainstorms, you don't need that. Kids want to walk to school like I did. Southfield Village to Stevens School, and Mr. Shea walked me across the street. Thank you.
Somebody else? Rebuttal? All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we talked a little bit about the Clairol property, and just for the record, on the Clairol property, we now have the Rogers International Magnet School. And that school costs north of $50 million. They came up in another debate forum. Somebody says, how do you know what it costs? Because we built one, and it costs more than $50 million, and those are the numbers, and we don't need to do a huge amount of planning to figure that out. But that was something that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been the president and helped make certain that thing got approved, and we'd be in worse shape. But quite frankly, I agree, we cannot do redistricting. And right now, we have no good options. No good options. I think it is looking at each school, can you use modulars, or can you shift some of the students through changing your magnet lottery system to change the preference so that more students will go to Westover, which we can expand. But I do not want to do redistricting. The only other choice on the table.
Mr. Martin, your time is.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Fedeli.
Yeah, just one last thing. You know, in conjunction with this whole problem, the school system went out and did a survey of parents, and they asked them what kind of curriculum do they want for their students. And the curriculum choices were schools like your school, AITE, Westover, Schofield Magnet, and so on. And so my question is, if that's what our parents want for their students, why not expand these programs? Why not expand these schools, particularly as that bubble moves to middle schools and so on, so that more students can attend these schools and parents would be very satisfied. I think curriculum also plays a role in where we put kids, and I think parents are the best people to make that choice. It's our role to make sure that that availability of seats is there for those students. Thank you, Claude.
Ms. Murphy?
Well, again, I'd still like to flesh out each of these ideas. I think this idea, if the source of the increase in students is a baby boom, then that's one thing. If it's kids leaving the private schools because of the financial condition, the recession and the unemployment rates, then we need to be working with these private schools. So we need to really understand a little better than I listened to 2 different sessions from the Board of Ed on this source of the problem, but certainly the poor planning, we should have known between the zoning or building that there would be more students coming in if it was just from all of the building that's going on. So I would like to understand what is driving this, and since we can't build a school on time for the issue that we're trying to address. So that's why I would like to see people take my suggestion seriously.
Thank you all.
Candidates, you'll now have 2 minutes to give a closing statement. I ask you to please be mindful of your time. I want to remind the audience to hold their applause. We'll applaud at the very end of the debate. And Ms. Murphy, you're first under the agreement.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for coming this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and address the great questions put together by our panelists. I just want to say, I believe I am the most qualified candidate in this room. I have been responsible for $1 billion profit on a company, revenues of $1 billion. I had P&L, profit and loss responsibility for these companies. This company, it had many operating units and heavy industrial manufacturing companies throughout the United States, and really throughout North America. There were very heavy industrial serving the steel industry, the telecom industry, the auto industry. It was a very heavy union environment, and industries that were really driven by or being beaten down by the global competitors. I'm sorry. So I think I've been on the board of directors of a $10 billion company. Have served as their chair of their audit committee, and I've served on the board of trustees. I've served now 7 years as the treasurer of the town of Greenwich, so I know municipal government, and I know what needs to be done here. I've been studying the Stamford financial situation from the Board of Finance, and even prior to that, I know operational issues, and as I said, I've worked with very tough unions, and we've worked out deals where both sides, but you have to get the trust of the union, and I've done that in my life, and I've dealt with more people, and oh, that's a lot better. It said 40 seconds. I was a little concerned. But anyway, I have worked these transactions that I'm talking about that we must do with our unions, and it does take an awful lot of trust. You have to build two-way communications and trust, and that is one thing in my career I've been very successful in developing those relationships and having, as I said, open, frank conversations with the rank and file about the financial situation, and I will have those conversations, and a vote for me will not be lost. You vote for me, or you're going to be voting for the status quo. Thank you.
Mr. Zito.
Hello, everybody. I don't have a political background. I'm not a professional politician. I'm a working man. You know, during the storms, I will be out here, hands-on person, just like George Washington did back in the American Revolution. Instead of going home in the warm comfy, I'll be out there working with my guys, and a lot of people know that. I own my own business. I'm a father of 2 kids. There's a little bit of information missing here on mine. I could fill it. I'm here for the taxpayers, the working taxpayers, non-working taxpayers. Get it? Non-working taxpayers. We need to bring more work at the city of Stamford. As of mayor, I will do that. I will try to keep the big business here, try to get our education rolling, and that's a real tight spot. I'm not going to give you a portfolio 15 feet long. Yes, they have more education than I do. I can run this town. I run my business. I run other businesses in this town that my candidacy doesn't know about. But I do. Ran garbage businesses. As of mayor, city of Stamford, yeah, I'm the youngest guy. Are you going to vote for me? Who knows? I'm independent since high school. Right now, I'm unaffiliated. I'm not on the ballot twice. I'm on it once because I'm the working man. I'm here to the end to finish this. Thank you. If you need me, I'll be at the back door.
Mr. Martin?
I love this city. And that is why, for the past 30 years, I volunteered my time to make Stamford a better place to live, a better place to work, and a better place to raise a family. Today, Stamford is the envy of all the other major cities in Connecticut, and I am proud of my contributions. Now, remember when Bobby Valentine was chasing prostitutes from his restaurant on Main Street? I helped pave the way for the Downtown Special Services District. And when not a single heart attack victim survived the trip to the hospital, I helped establish the Stamford EMS, which is the best ambulance system in New England. And when they found pesticide contamination in North Stamford, I led the charge to close Schofield Town Park, to connect the homes to city water, and to start the well water testing. I have written laws and initiated charter revision. I have cut budgets and worked on tax abatements for seniors and veterans. I have supported our parks, and I have supported our schools. I have a record of getting things done in Stamford, and no other candidate can claim that record. We have a great city, and we have a great future. But we've been drifting. And quite frankly, I'm tired of reading stories about unethical behavior and fraud, particularly since we're ignoring some of our most critical issues. These issues demand the leadership that only the mayor can provide, and that's what this election is about. Because we need a mayor who can make City Hall more effective and more efficient in order to save taxes. We need a mayor who can make the City Hall more transparent and, quite frankly, make City Hall accountable. We need a mayor with local experience who can work with the elected boards in order to gain consensus and get things done. We need a mayor who's going to be honest, put you first, and has a record of getting things done. We need a mayor who's ready on day one, and I believe I'm that guy, and I would appreciate your support on November 5th. Thank you to the Prometheum panel and to everyone coming. Thank you.
Mr. Fideli?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you to Prometheum, all of you out there, my volunteers who've been working hard, and also these great leaders up on the dais, Washington, Franklin, Adams, all these great leaders. You know, we all have a record here, except for obviously Mr. Zito, who obviously has stated he has never run for public office. I also do believe that we're all working people up here, too. That's not a unique characteristic to one candidate. However, that record we need to take a look at. We have a record by some of the candidates who've been here 30, 34 years collectively. And what you've heard tonight is an acknowledgement of the issues that have occurred in the city of Stamford. And there have been a variety of them that we've tried to address and talk about our solution. And yet, they've been in positions of leadership. They've been in positions of being able to get things done, particularly in Mr. Martin's case as the majority candidate. And yet we still have those issues 30 years later. So my question is, what's going to be different on day one that has been going on for 10,958 days, including leap year? I don't know. But I do have a record. I have a record of a business experience, starting an entrepreneurship here, ground up, to building a national company. I have a record of government service, both locally, statewide, and then working in the executive branch of the governor's office, a record where accomplishments were made, and for the right reasons. And I think probably the greatest record I have is who I am as a person, having lived here 55 of my 58 years after immigrating here with my parents with nothing but the shoes on our feet and the clothes on our back. And that's a record of giving to this community, not only on election days, but every day of the year. Volunteering for the hospital board, volunteering for the Yearwood Center. We will continue to do that, irrespective of the results of this election. And that is a record I'm very proud of. Please consider me on November 5th as your candidate for mayor. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you. I know how difficult it is to stand up there. Heck, it's difficult to sit here, so it must be very, very tough to stand up there. Thank you very much. And again, let's give another round of applause for our candidates.